The silence broke first, not the comforting kind. The kind that meant something in the room had noticed him and was deciding what to do about it. Jonah Hale stopped walking. The chamber was vast, carved from black stone veined with faintly glowing lines that pulsed like a heartbeat. Alien architecture always did this, made human instincts useless. No corners to hide in, no obvious exits. Just space, light, and the sensation of being judged. You were told to wait outside. The voice was female, low, precise, not raised. That was worse. Jonah turned slowly. She stood at the far end of the chamber, elevated on a shallow dais that wasn't quite a throne. Tall, too still. Her skin reflected the ambient glow like polished obsidian dusted with starlight. Long ears swept back along her skull, adorned with thin metal rings that caught the light when she moved, which she hadn't. Not yet. I was told the delegation was delayed, Jonah said. I didn't realize you were the delay. A mistake. The air pressure shifted, not physically, socially. The kind of shift Jonah had learned to recognize after 12 years as a frontier negotiator. The kind that meant he had misjudged where the invisible line was. Her eyes focused on him. Gold. Not warm gold, weapon-grade gold. I am not a delay, she said. I am the reason this system has not been sterilized. Jonah swallowed. Then I'm grateful for your patience. She descended from the dais. Each step was silent. Her stride wasn't aggressive. It didn't need to be. Power radiated from her posture in a way that made Jonah acutely aware of the distance between his soft human skeleton and whatever evolutionary nightmare had produced hers. You are human, she said, not military. No, not clergy. No, not royalty. Jonah allowed himself a thin smile. Definitely not. She stopped 3 paces away, too close. Jonah resisted the instinct to step back. On her world, retreat without permission was read as weakness or prey behavior. He held his ground, heart hammering against his ribs. I am Kael'thira, she said, warden of the Ashen Reach, judge of foreign claims. An executioner when necessary. Of course you are, Jonah thought. Aloud he said, Jonah Hale, civil envoy, I'm here to assess whether coexistence is viable. Her gaze dropped, not to his face, to his hands. Jonah realized too late that he had clenched them into fists. A flicker of something crossed her expression. Interest. Your species lies badly, Kael'thira said, but your bodies betray you. She stepped closer. Jonah smelled ozone, heat. Something faintly metallic. You are afraid, she continued. But you are not submissive, not aggressive either. That is unusual. He exhaled slowly. Fear doesn't mean surrender. Her head tilted. A predator considering an unfamiliar sound. No, she said softly, it does. Silence stretched again, thick charged. Jonah made his second mistake. I've read your psychological profiles, he said. They describe your people as emotionally restrained. Her eyes snapped back to his face. The glow in the chamber brightened. You find that inaccurate. Jonah hesitated. Every instinct screamed stop. But the analysis brief echoed in his mind. They respect truth spoken under pressure. Yes, he said. I think you're disciplined, not restrained. There's a difference. The silence sharpened. Kael'thira smiled. It was not a friendly expression. You see more than you should, she said. That can be dangerous. Jonah met her gaze. So can underestimating humans. The temperature dropped, not metaphorically. The veins in the walls flared bright. You stand in my hall, Kael'thira said, voice now edged with something ancient and sharp and suggest parody. No, Jonah said. I'm suggesting accountability. Power that doesn't question itself collapses, eventually. Her smile vanished. She moved. One moment she was in front of him. The next, her hand was wrapped around his wrist, gripped like iron forged with intent. Jonah gasped, not from pain, but from the sudden realization that she could break him effortlessly and was choosing not to. She leaned close. If I wanted you broken, she murmured, you would already be on the floor. Her eyes searched his face not for fear but for regret. Jonah forced his voice steady. Then why aren't I? Something shifted, a hesitation brief, dangerous. Because you spoke without pleading, she said, and without threat. She released him. Jonah's arm throbbed. His pulse raced. Kael'thira stepped back, studying him as if reassessing an equation. You have crossed a threshold, she said, whether you intended to or not. I seem to do that, Jonah replied hoarsely. Yes, she said, you do. She turned away, signaling the chamber's hidden mechanisms. The walls dimmed. The pressure eased. Your assessment will continue, Kael'thira said. But understand this, Jonah Hale. She looked back at him over her shoulder. On my world, those who see clearly are tested, not rewarded. Jonah flexed his aching hand. I didn't come here for rewards. Her lips curved again, slow, deliberate. Good, she said, because what comes next is not mercy. And as the chamber doors sealed behind him, Jonah realized, with a clarity that chilled him to the bone, that this was no longer diplomacy. It was a trial. Jonah Hale did not sleep. The chamber they assigned him was comfortable in the way only alien hospitality could be, precise, sufficient, and completely indifferent to human psychology. The bed adjusted to his weight automatically. The air composition shifted every hour to optimize rest. Soft light pulsed along the walls in a rhythm calculated to calm mammalian nervous systems. It failed, because Jonah now understood something the briefing files had never mentioned. Kael'thira hadn't threatened him. She had marked him. He felt it, not physically, but socially. The way guards' eyes lingered too long when they escorted him through the corridors. The way conversations hushed a half-second after he passed. On frontier worlds, attention like that meant one thing. Someone powerful was deciding what to do with you. The door chimed. Jonah sat up immediately. Yes. It opened without waiting for permission. A different alien entered, female, but nothing like Kael'thira. Shorter, leaner. Her skin held a matte gray tone, and her eyes were entirely black, reflective like polished stone. No visible weapons. That didn't reassure him. I am Ithilin, she said, judicial attaché to the warden. Of course you are, Jonah thought. You're early, he said. You are late, she replied calmly. The trial begins now. Jonah frowned. Trial. Ithilin tilted her head. You believed her words were metaphorical. Right, lesson learned. Never assume metaphor with apex species. Explain, Jonah said. Ithilin gestured, and the wall behind her became transparent, revealing a vast open arena below the complex. Black stone, sharp geometry, no safety rails. At its center stood a single figure, human, bound. Jonah's stomach dropped. That is Lieutenant Mara Kess, Ithilin said. Human, logistics officer, assigned to supply arbitration in this sector. She falsified transit codes 3 months ago. Jonah's mind raced. That's a civil offense. On your worlds, Ithilin agreed. Here, it is classified as resource theft during scarcity conditions. Meaning execution. What does this have to do with me? Jonah asked. Ithilin's gaze sharpened. You argued that power must question itself. The warden found that interesting. The word carried weight. You will advise her. Jonah stared. Advise her on what? On whether the human should live. The arena lights brightened. Mara looked up. Their eyes met. Recognition flashed across her face, relief, then confusion, then fear. Jonah felt something cold settle in his chest. This was the bedell. This was the cost. Kael'thira's voice echoed through the chamber, amplified and absolute. Jonah Hale, she said, you speak of accountability, of parity, of systems that must justify their power. She appeared above the arena on a raised platform, hands clasped behind her back, posture relaxed. Here is your test. The restraints around Mara's wrists glowed faintly. Advise me, Kael'thira continued, as if your words carry weight. Tell me whether this human's life is worth the disruption her actions caused. Jonah's mouth went dry. He looked at Mara again. She was shaking but standing. Not begging. Good, Jonah thought bitterly. Begging never helps with species like this. What happens if I refuse? Jonah asked. Kael'thira's eyes met his. Then you demonstrate that your principles collapse under proximity, she said. And I will conclude that humans speak of ethics only when no blood is involved. And if I argue for her release, then you argue against my law. Publicly, Jonah let out a slow breath. So that's the trap, not physical, political. If he failed, humanity lost credibility. If he succeeded, he challenged a system that killed to maintain order. He stepped forward to the edge of the observation platform. Why her? Jonah asked. Kael'thira didn't hesitate, because she broke the rules for a reason. Jonah looked down. Mara, he called, her head snapped up. Jonah, what did you do? She hesitated only a second. I rerouted supplies from an approved trade route. A mining settlement was going to starve while shipments sat in customs limbo. Jonah closed his eyes briefly. Of course. How many survived because of it? He asked. 8,000, Mara said quietly. At least. A murmur rippled through the alien observers. Jonah opened his eyes and looked directly at Kael'thira. You asked me to advise you, he said. Not as a subordinate, as an equal. She inclined her head a fraction. Proceed. Jonah swallowed. Then here is my judgment, he said, voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. Your law is efficient, clean, brutal. It maintains order by fear and predictability. Kael'thira's gaze sharpened, but she did not interrupt. But it also creates officers like her, Jonah continued, pointing at Mara. People willing to break it when it fails living beings. Silence. If you execute her, Jonah said, you reinforce compliance. You also teach every human under your jurisdiction that doing the right thing is fatal. He met Kael'thira's eyes. If you spare her, he went on, you undermine your own law, but you gain something far more valuable. Which is, Kael'thira asked softly. Loyalty born from trust, Jonah said, not fear. The arena was utterly silent now. Kael'thira descended from her platform, each step echoed. She stopped directly in front of Jonah. You argue well, she said, but words are easy. She gestured sharply. Mara's restraints tightened. She cried out. Jonah flinched before he could stop himself. Kael'thira noticed. Would you take her punishment? She asked suddenly. The question hit like a blade. Define punishment, Jonah said carefully. Exile from this system, Kael'thira replied. Permanent. You would be barred from all future negotiations here. Humanity would lose its most promising envoy. Jonah didn't look away, and she lives. Yes, Jonah exhaled. There it was. The irreversible cost. He thought of Earth, of his career, of the careful ladder he'd climbed by being rational, measured, replaceable. Then he thought of 8,000 people who were alive because someone had broken the rules. I accept, Jonah said. The word rang through the chamber. Mara sobbed. Kael'thira went very still. For a long moment, Jonah wondered if he'd miscalculated and was about to die instead. Then Kael'thira smiled. Not predator, not judge, something else. Interesting, she said. She raised her hand. Mara's restraints disengaged. Release her, Kael'thira commanded, and record this ruling. The observers stirred, shocked. Kael'thira turned to Jonah. You have chosen consequence over convenience, she said. You have wounded your own standing to preserve another. She stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear her next words. On my world, that is not weakness. Her fingers brushed his wrist again. This, she said softly, is how one proves worth. Jonah's heart was still racing as guards escorted Mara away alive. He looked back at Kael'thira. What happens to me now? Her golden eyes locked onto his. Now, she said, you are no longer a guest. The lights dimmed. You are under my protection. And Jonah realized, with equal parts dread and awe, that exile had been the small price. What Kael'thira intended to claim from him next would be far more dangerous. Protection, Jonah learned, was not the same as safety. The guards who escorted him this time wore different markings, darker, angular, etched with symbols that didn't appear in any of the briefing files. They moved with the quiet confidence of those who answered to a single authority and feared nothing else. Kael'thira's authority. They led him away from the diplomatic quarter and deeper into the structure, past corridors Jonah had never seen, where the walls no longer glowed softly but pulsed with slow, deliberate light. The air felt heavier here, warmer, charged with something that made the back of his neck prickle. "Where are you taking me?" Jonah asked. No answer, of course. They stopped before a door that was not a door so much as a slab, black stone veined with dull crimson lines. One of the guards placed a hand against it. The veins flared and the slab withdrew soundlessly into the wall. Inside was not a chamber. It was a circle. Stone benches carved directly from the floor rose in tiers, surrounding a central platform etched with old symbols, older than the complex itself. The air smelled faintly of iron and ozone. Kael'thira stood at the center. She was not alone. 5 others occupied the benches. Alien, all of them. Different subspecies, different forms, but every posture screamed the same thing: power. Kael'thira turned as Jonah entered. "You arrive as protected," she said, "not as equal." Jonah nodded once, understood. One of the seated figures leaned forward. Tall, broad, with skin like fractured stone and eyes that glowed a dull red. "You spared a lawbreaker," it said. "You weakened order." Jonah met its gaze. "I strengthened outcomes." A low murmur rippled through the circle. Kael'thira raised one hand. Silence fell immediately. "This council does not judge your words," she said. "We judge cost." Her golden eyes fixed on Jonah. "You accepted exile to save another. That demonstrated value." She stepped closer to him. "But protection is not free." Jonah felt it then, the shift. This was not a debate. "This council governs the Ashen Reach," Kael'thira continued. "Our authority is maintained through balance. Fear, respect, consequence. You have disrupted that balance." The stone-skinned counselor snarled softly. "So the human must pay." But Kael'thira did not look away from Jonah. "Yes," she agreed calmly, "he must." Jonah's jaw tightened. "Name it." A pause, then Kael'thira said, "You will bind yourself to this system." The words echoed. Jonah frowned. "Define bind." "But you will remain," she said. "No rotation, no recall, no extraction. You will act as intermediary advisor and, when required, moral counterweight." The council murmured again, louder this time. "You will no longer represent only humanity," Kael'thira went on. "You will represent consequence." Jonah felt the weight of it settle in his chest. "You're asking me to give up Earth," he said quietly. "I am asking you to give up escape," Kael'thira corrected. Another counselor spoke, this one slender with elongated limbs and eyes like liquid silver. "And if he refuses?" Kael'thira's answer was immediate. "Then my protection ends." But the implication hung heavy in the air. Jonah looked around the circle. Every face watched him, not with hostility, but with interest, like predators evaluating whether a creature was worth keeping alive. He thought of Mara, alive because he'd said yes once already. He exhaled. "If I accept," Jonah said, "what happens when I disagree with you again?" Kael'thira's lips curved, not quite a smile. "Then you will argue with me," she said. "Publicly, often." That surprised him. "You're not afraid of that." "I am afraid of stagnation," Kael'thira replied. "And you are disruptive." "A beat in useful ways." Jonah let out a short, humorless laugh. "You realize this will make me your problem." "Yes," she said, "that is the point." Silence returned. Jonah felt something deep and quiet inside him settle, not fear, not courage, but clarity. "All right," he said, "I'll stay." But the stone-skinned counselor slammed a fist into the bench. "Then mark him." Kael'thira turned, agreed. Before Jonah could ask what that meant, she moved. Her hand closed around his forearm, harder this time. The symbols on the central platform flared to life, crimson light racing outward in concentric rings. Pain exploded up Jonah's arm. He cried out, dropping to one knee as heat tore through his nerves, sharp and precise, like something carving itself into him. Kael'thira did not release him. "This mark binds you to my authority," she said over the hum of energy. "It will grant access, protection, and recognition." Jonah gritted his teeth. "And the cost?" Her eyes held his. "It will also ensure," she said evenly, "that you feel the consequences of every ruling you influence." The light surged. Images slammed into Jonah's mind: hunger, fear, loss, relief, survival. Not memories, repercussions. The echo of lives altered by decisions made in rooms like this. He screamed. When it ended, Jonah collapsed fully to the stone floor, gasping. The light faded. The circle was silent. Kael'thira knelt beside him for the first time, her voice lower, almost private. "You wanted accountability," she said. "Now you will carry it." She released his arm. The mark burned faintly beneath his skin, visible, intricate, permanent. Jonah lay there, shaking, vision blurring. "You've changed me," he rasped. "Yes," Kael'thira said, "irreversibly." She stood and addressed the council. "The human remains." No one argued. As guards helped Jonah to his feet, Kael'thira stepped close once more. "You should rest," she said softly. "The mark will hurt for days." Jonah met her gaze, exhausted and very aware that something fundamental had shifted between them. "You warned me," he said. "That protection wasn't mercy." Her expression softened just a fraction. "And you stayed anyway." She turned away. "Welcome to the Ashen Reach, Jonah Hale." As the doors closed behind him, Jonah realized the truth. He hadn't been spared. He had been claimed. The mark woke before Jonah did. Pain wasn't the right word for it. Pain implied a single source, a single injury. This was layered, a pressure behind his eyes, a dull burn under his skin, a sense of weight pressing inward, as if gravity had decided he personally was responsible for holding something together. Jonah gasped awake and immediately rolled onto his side, retching. Nothing came up. His body had already learned there was no relief in emptying itself. The chamber lights brightened in response to his vitals, softening, warming, trying to help. The effort felt insulting. He sat up slowly, every movement accompanied by a faint flare of heat from the mark along his forearm. The symbol had darkened overnight, lines sharper, more defined. No longer just something done to him, but something that had settled into him. A knock, not a chime, not a polite diplomatic signal. A knock. Jonah stiffened. "Come in." The door slid open. Kael'thira entered alone. She looked different, not weakened, not uncertain, but alert in a way Jonah hadn't seen before, like someone approaching unstable ground. "You're awake," she said. "I didn't sleep," Jonah replied hoarsely. "Unless screaming internally counts." Her gaze flicked to his arm. "The first resonance usually manifests within 12 cycles," she said. "You experienced it early." "Lucky me." She almost smiled, almost. "Tell me what you feel," Kael'thira said. Jonah hesitated, then laughed once short, sharp. "You mean besides regret and nausea?" Her eyes held steady. "Yes." He closed his eyes. At first there was nothing. Then there it was, a spike, sharp, sudden. Jonah sucked in a breath, gripping the edge of the bed as images flooded his mind uninvited. A settlement, dust, thin air, children with hollow eyes, a ration shipment diverted, a ledger signed, a decision made somewhere far away by someone who would never see the faces. The hunger wasn't abstract, it was present. Jonah groaned, clutching his arm as the mark burned hot. 3,000, he whispered. "No, wait, 2,800 and..." He broke off with a gasp. "They're stabilizing," he said, voice shaking. "Someone changed something. The pressure's easing." The sensation faded, leaving him drenched in sweat and breathing hard. He opened his eyes. Kael'thira was very still. "You felt a council adjustment," she said quietly. Jonah stared at her. "That wasn't you." "No." "Someone else rerouted resources." "Yes, and I felt it because..." He looked down at his arm. "Because the mark ties me into the system." "Not the system," Kael'thira corrected. She stepped closer. "Into consequence." Jonah laughed again, this time without humor. "You didn't tell me it would be like this." "I told you it would hurt." "That wasn't pain," Jonah snapped. "That was responsibility without consent." The words hung between them. For the first time since he'd met her, Kael'thira looked, struck. "Consent," she repeated slowly. Jonah pushed himself to his feet, unsteady but upright. "You govern through law and force and tradition, but this..." He gestured at his arm. "This is empathy weaponized. You turn me into a living feedback loop." "Yes," she said, "and you don't carry it." Silence. Jonah met her eyes. Do you? Her jaw tightened, barely perceptible. No, she said. The answer landed harder than any blow. So I bleed for decisions you don't have to feel, Jonah said softly. That's the balance. Kael'thira's voice lowered. I carry other costs. I'm sure you do, Jonah replied, but not this one. The air between them felt tight now, charged. This mark, Jonah continued, means I can't hide behind theory. I can't argue abstractly. Every decision has a price I'll feel in my bones. Yes. And you think that makes me useful? I think it makes you honest, Kael'thira said. Jonah shook his head slowly. No, it makes me vulnerable. Something in her expression shifted at that word. Vulnerability, she said carefully, is not currency in this system. It is if you want it to survive long-term, Jonah shot back. Fear enforces order. Vulnerability creates investment. Kael'thira studied him, really studied him now. You are already challenging me again, she said. Jonah let out a breath. I told you I would. A pause, then unexpectedly Kael'thira sat. Not on a throne, not standing above him. On the edge of the stone bench opposite his bed. You felt 3,000 lives stabilize, she said. You will feel many more things. Some you will agree with. Some you will hate. Jonah swallowed. And if it breaks me? Her eyes didn't leave his. Then I will know, she said, that I asked too much. That stopped him, not because it was comforting, but because it was the first time she'd acknowledged limits. Why me? Jonah asked quietly. Really? Kael'thira looked away, toward the faintly glowing wall, toward a city that depended on her decisions and would never thank her for them. Because you stood in my hall and argued ethics without begging, she said. Because you chose loss over convenience. And because when I tested you, you did not ask how to win, only what it would cost. She looked back at him. I need someone who feels what I cannot afford to. Jonah absorbed that slowly. So I'm your conscience. Her lips curved, sharp but not unkind. If you prefer. Jonah looked down at the mark again. It pulsed faintly. Somewhere someone's life had just changed. All right, he said finally. But we changed the rules. Kael'thira's brow rose. You are not in a position to. Yes, I am, Jonah interrupted. Because if I'm going to carry this, I don't do it alone. Silence. What do you propose? She asked. Jonah met her gaze. You let me mark you back. The chamber went utterly still. Kael'thira's eyes widened just a fraction. That has never been done, she said. Neither has binding a human like this, Jonah replied. You want balance. You don't get it by outsourcing pain. A long moment passed. Then Kael'thira stood, slowly, deliberately. You would dare bind me, she said, to feel what you feel. Jonah didn't look away. If this partnership means anything beyond control, yes. The silence stretched taut as a drawn wire. Finally, Kael'thira spoke. Rest, she said, voice unreadable. We will discuss this. She turned to leave. At the door she paused. Jonah. Yes. Her back still to him, she said softly. You are becoming dangerous. When she was gone, Jonah lay back against the stone bed, heart pounding. The mark pulsed again, lighter this time. Not pain, recognition. And for the first time since arriving in the Ashen Reach, Jonah understood the truth. He wasn't just changing the system. He was changing her. The council chamber was not meant for hesitation. Every line, every angle, every elevation had been designed to eliminate doubt. Decisions were made here, final ones. Jonah had felt their weight before from the outside. Now he stood at the center of them. Kael'thira had summoned the council within a single cycle of his demand. That alone told Jonah how deeply it had struck. The mark along his arm burned as he entered the circle, not sharply, but insistently, as if warning him that something irreversible was approaching. The 5 counselors were already seated. Their postures were rigid, alert, hostile. You overstep, the stone-skinned counselor said immediately. The human proposes contamination of authority. Kael'thira raised one hand. Silence fell. She stood beside Jonah, not above him this time, not in front, beside. The human proposes balance, she said. You will listen. The silver-eyed counselor leaned forward. He is already compromised. The mark destabilizes him. But Jonah's vision blurred for a heartbeat, not from fear, from impact. Pain's sharp, sudden lance through his chest, stealing his breath. He staggered, barely keeping his feet. Kael'thira turned instantly. "What is it?" But Jonah clenched his teeth, forcing himself to speak through it. "You just authorized a purge." The chamber froze. "No," the stone-skinned counselor said. "A containment." Jonah shook his head, sweat beading along his brow. "Containment doesn't feel like that." Images flooded him, structures collapsing, atmosphere venting, people running toward sealed doors that would not open in time. He gasped. "You didn't reroute evacuation corridors. You prioritized asset preservation." The pain spiked again, worse this time. Kael'thira's eyes flashed. "Stop," she commanded. The mark burned white-hot. Then something new, a second resonance, not in Jonah, in her. Kael'thira stiffened. Her breath caught not visibly, but Jonah felt it, a sharp hitch in the invisible thread between them. Her hand flew to her side, fingers digging into the armored fabric as if bracing against an internal blow. The council erupted. "What did you do?" The silver-eyed one demanded. Kael'thira did not answer. Her golden eyes had widened not in fear but in shock. She felt it, not the abstract report, not the strategic summary. The moment, the sudden vacuum, the terror. The final understanding that no one was coming. She inhaled sharply, once, twice. Then her voice cut through the chamber like a blade. "Abort," she said. The counselors froze. "I said abort," Kael'thira repeated louder. "Reverse the order. Open the corridors. Divert power now." "That will cost," the stone-skinned counselor began. "I do not care," Kael'thira snapped. The walls flared as systems responded. The pressure in Jonah's chest eased abruptly, leaving him swaying, breath ragged but intact. Kael'thira stood very still. Her hands were shaking. The council stared at her in disbelief. "You felt it," Jonah said quietly. Kael'thira turned toward him. For the first time since he had met her, the mask was gone completely. "Yes," she said. Her voice was steady, but only because she forced it to be. "That was," she stopped, restarted, "inefficient." Jonah almost laughed. "That's one way to put it." The silver-eyed counselor stood. "This proves the danger of his proposal. Authority cannot function if authority cannot withstand consequence," Kael'thira interrupted. "Then it deserves to fail." Silence slammed down. She stepped forward, eyes blazing. "You speak of order as if it exists without cost," she continued. "I have enforced that cost my entire life, at a distance. Today, for the first time, I felt it." She looked around the chamber. "And I will not go back." But the stone-skinned counselor growled. "You would bind yourself to suffering." Kael'thira's gaze flicked briefly to Jonah, then back to the council. "I would bind myself to truth." Jonah's mark pulsed hot but not painful recognition. "This council will decide," the silver-eyed one said coldly. Kael'thira smiled, slow, terrifying. "No," she said, "it won't." The lights dimmed. Power shifted, not electronically but politically. "You forget," Kael'thira said, voice carrying the weight of centuries, "that my authority is not granted by this council." She stepped onto the central platform. "It is enforced by it." The counselors went still. Kael'thira turned to Jonah. "You wanted balance," she said. "You have it." She extended her arm, the same place he bore the mark. "Bind me." The chamber held its breath. Jonah stared at her arm. This was it, not a test, a point of no return. "If I do this," he said softly, "you won't be able to look away again." "I don't want to," Kael'thira replied. Jonah reached out. The moment his fingers touched her skin, the mark flared, light racing outward, not consuming but connecting. Kael'thira gasped, not in pain, in impact. Her knees buckled. Jonah caught her instinctively, holding her upright as sensation poured through both of them. Fear, relief, grief, survival, the echo of lives narrowly saved. She clutched his arm, breath unsteady. "Stars," she whispered. "This is what you carry." "Yes," Jonah said quietly, "every day." The light faded. Kael'thira straightened slowly, visibly changed, not weaker but grounded. She looked at the council. "This system will not collapse because its leaders feel." she said. It will endure because they cannot ignore the cost of ruling. The council said nothing. They did not need to. The shift was complete. Later, much later, Jonah sat alone on the edge of a high balcony. The city of the Ashen Reach spread out beneath him like a living organism. Kael'thira joined him without a sound. She stood close, but not dominating, equal. "You altered the trajectory of this system," she said. Jonah exhaled. "You let me." She considered that. "Yes," she said, "I did." She looked at him sidelong, and Jonah. "Yeah." Her lips curved, not sharp this time, real. "You are the most dangerous thing I have ever invited into my domain." Jonah smiled faintly. "You say that like a compliment." "It is," she said. They stood together in silence, bound now not by ritual or authority, but by shared consequence. And somewhere deep within the Ashen Reach, systems adjusted. Not because they were ordered to, but because, for the first time, those in power could feel what they did. The warning did not arrive with drama. No alarms, no dramatic council summons, just a pressure spike in Jonah's chest so sudden and so severe that it drove him to his knees on the balcony. Kael'thira turned instantly. "Jonah." He couldn't answer. The mark burned, not hot, not sharp, but heavy, like a collapsing star pressing inward. Images flooded him faster than before, no longer singular events but cascading consequences. A fleet, unregistered, cold intent, no negotiation vectors. "They're coming," Jonah gasped. "Not diplomats, not traitors." Kael'thira's posture shifted, not alarmed, alerted. Command awakened in her like a weapon unsheathed. "Origin?" she asked. Jonah squeezed his eyes shut, forcing focus through the pain. "Outer fringe," he said. "They've studied your system. They know you don't strike first. They're counting on delay." Kael'thira's jaw tightened. "Predators." She activated her wrist interface. "Defense Council, immediate convergence." The city below was already changing. Traffic rerouted. Power grids hardened. Civilian sectors dimmed to emergency protocols. Jonah staggered to his feet. "They won't attack the core," he said. "They'll bleed the edges, starvation, panic, force you to make examples." Kael'thira looked at him sharply. "You're certain?" "I can feel the intent," Jonah said. "This isn't conquest, it's coercion." She nodded once. "Then they misunderstand us." The council chamber filled fast this time. No posturing, no ritual, war-trimmed excess. The silver-eyed counselor spoke first. "Preemptive strike." "No," Jonah said immediately. The stone-skinned one snarled. "You hesitate again." Jonah shook his head, teeth clenched as another surge hit him. "No, I calculate." He looked at Kael'thira. "They want you to choose between order and mercy. If you strike first, you validate their narrative. And if I don't," Kael'thira said calmly, "they will kill thousands." Jonah met her gaze. "Unless we let them see the cost," he said. Silence. "You propose vulnerability as deterrence." The silver-eyed counselor asked incredulously. "I propose truth as a weapon," Jonah replied. "Bind them." Kael'thira inhaled slowly. "You want to project the mark." "Yes," Jonah said, "temporarily targeted. Let their command feel what they're about to do." The council erupted. "That would expose us. To retaliation. To chaos." Kael'thira raised one hand. Silence fell. "You forget," she said, eyes glowing faintly, "who enforces authority here." She turned to Jonah. "The projection will burn you," she said quietly. "This is not theoretical. You may not survive it." Jonah exhaled. "I know." The mark pulsed hard. He felt it too, the weight of what he was offering. Kael'thira studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Prepare the lattice," she commanded. "I will anchor, Jonah will project." The chamber froze. "You will share the load?" Jonah asked, surprised. Kael'thira's gaze did not waver. "I do not outsource pain." The projection chamber was ancient, older than the Ashen Reach itself. Jonah stood at its center, hands braced against the stone as energy rose around him like a tide. The mark along his arm burned brighter than ever before, lines lifting from his skin like living light. Kael'thira stepped in behind him, her hands settled on his shoulders. "Grounding, anchoring, breathe," she said. "Do not resist." Let it pass through you. The lattice activated. Jonah screamed. Not from pain, from immensity. Millions of possible outcomes surged outward: fear, hunger, panic, death, compressed into a single message aimed directly at the invading fleet's command core. He felt their shock, their confusion, their sudden horrifying understanding of what pressing forward would cost. Kael'thira grunted behind him, breath hitching as the feedback loop slammed back. "Hold," she commanded. Jonah's vision went white. Then release. The lattice powered down. Jonah collapsed forward, caught by Kael'thira before he hit the stone. The chamber was silent. A console chimed. The silver-eyed counselor stared at the readout. There, withdrawing. Jonah laughed weakly. "Told you." Kael'thira held him upright, her grip firm. "You did not hesitate," she said softly, "even knowing it might kill you." Jonah swallowed. "Neither did you." She looked down at him. Something unguarded passed between them. "Rest," she said. "We are not finished yet, but the system stands." As Jonah was carried from the chamber, consciousness fading, one thought anchored him. This wasn't diplomacy anymore. This was something far more dangerous. Shared power. Shared pain. And enemies who now knew exactly what kind of system they were dealing with. Jonah did not wake gently. He surfaced like someone dragged up from deep water, lungs burning, heart hammering, body unsure whether it was still allowed to exist. Pain came second. Not sharp. Not explosive, total. Every nerve screamed information at once. The mark along his arm felt swollen, overcharged, its lines no longer faintly luminous but dark and jagged, as if something had clawed its way outward and failed. He tried to move, failed. "You're awake." Kael'thira's voice, close, too close for formality. Jonah forced his eyes open. The chamber was unfamiliar, not diplomatic, not ceremonial, smaller, private. Walls of matte stone instead of glowing veins. No guards. No observers, just her. She stood beside the bed, arms crossed, posture rigid in a way that had nothing to do with authority and everything to do with restraint. "How bad?" Jonah croaked. Her jaw tightened. "You exceeded survivable thresholds." "That sounds inefficient." She almost smiled. Almost. "You were unconscious for 18 cycles," she said. "The lattice feedback nearly burned the mark out of you." Jonah swallowed. "Did it work?" "Yes." "Then worth it." Her eyes snapped to his. "No," she said sharply. "It was reckless." That stopped him. Kael'thira did not scold. She commanded, she judged, she executed. She did not react like this. "You approved it," Jonah said quietly. "I approved a calculated risk," she replied. "Not self-erasure." Jonah shifted, pain flaring, but something else moved with it. A dull echo, distant but present, fear. Not his, hers. Jonah went still. "You thought I wasn't coming back," he said. Silence. That was answer enough. The door chimed. Kael'thira did not turn. "Not now," she said. The door opened anyway. The silver-eyed counselor stepped inside, hesitant, wary. "The outer systems report renewed movement," it said. "Smaller vessels, probes." Jonah closed his eyes. "They're testing the edge." Kael'thira nodded once. "They always do." The counselor's gaze flicked to Jonah. "He is compromised." Kael'thira turned slowly. Her expression was cold. "He is recovering," she said. "Choose your words carefully." The counselor hesitated. The projection frightened them, yes, but fear fades. We must prepare a permanent deterrent. Jonah's mark pulsed, faint but insistent. "Permanent deterrence means annihilation," Jonah said hoarsely. "And they know it." Kael'thira looked at him. "Explain." "They're not afraid of death," Jonah said. "They're afraid of meaningless loss. If you strike hard, you prove you're predictable. If you hesitate, you prove you're weak." He exhaled. "You have to do something worse." The counselor frowned. "Worse than annihilation." Jonah opened his eyes and met its gaze. "You have to let them choose." Kael'thira stared at him, understanding dawning slowly. "You want me to open the system," she said. "Briefly," Jonah replied. "Controlled, transparent." The counselor recoiled. "That's insanity." "No," Jonah said. "It's accountability scaled up." Kael'thira turned away from both of them, pacing once, just once, a crack in the mask. Then she stopped. You will be present, she said to Jonah, not a question. Yes. You will feel everything. Jonah nodded. I already do. She turned to the counselor. Prepare a broadcast, Kael'thira commanded. Open a single corridor. No weapons, no shields, just truth. The counselor hesitated. If they attack, then they will feel it, Kael'thira said. All of it. The counselor bowed stiffly and withdrew. The chamber fell quiet again. Kael'thira approached the bed. You are not fit for this, she said. Jonah smiled faintly. Neither were you, the first time. Her eyes flicked to the mark on his arm. It's changing, she said. Yeah, Jonah replied. So are you. That earned him a look sharp, conflicted, unguarded. You have altered my threat calculus, she said. That is dangerous. He met her gaze. You altered mine first. The broadcast began without ceremony. A corridor of space opened, unshielded, visible, vulnerable. Jonah's breath hitched as the mark flared again, feeding him data faster than his mind could fully process. The invading fleet paused, confusion, disbelief. Then contact. A single vessel crossed the threshold, no weapons charged, no shields raised. Jonah felt at the moment their command realized what was happening. The weight, the lives. The consequences waiting on the other side of a single decision. The pain hit him hard enough to draw a cry from his throat. Kael'thira was there instantly, gripping his arm, anchoring him. Stay with me, she said. Not command. Request. I'm here, Jonah gasped. The vessel stopped, drifted, then transmitted. Withdrawal acknowledged, system closed. No further incursions. The pressure eased. Jonah sagged back against the bed, shaking. Kael'thira did not release him. She stayed hand firm, presence solid. They chose, she said quietly. Yes, Jonah whispered. You gave them the chance. Silence stretched. Then Kael'thira spoke again, softer. You nearly died. Jonah turned his head slightly. You sound displeased. She looked down at him. I do not tolerate losing assets, she said. He smiled weakly. Glad to know irate. Her hand tightened just enough to hurt. Do not do that again, she said. Jonah met her eyes. I will, he said honestly, if it's necessary. Her expression darkened. The next time, she said, you will not face it alone. Something settled between them then. Not romance, not command, a pact. As the system sealed and the threat withdrew fully, Jonah felt the mark quiet, not gone, never gone, but balanced. For the first time since arriving in the Ashen Reach, the pain receded enough to leave space for something else. Trust. And Kael'thira, standing over him, finally allowed herself to look afraid. Not of enemies, of losing him. The system did not celebrate. There were no banners, no declarations, no ceremonial acknowledgments of what had almost been lost, or what had quietly changed. The Ashen Reach simply adjusted, roots recalibrated, councils reconvened with different priorities. Orders were issued with pauses in them now, moments where someone stopped and considered. Jonah felt every one of those pauses, not sharply anymore, not like wounds, more like weight redistributed, still heavy, but no longer crushing. He stood on the same balcony where everything had first begun to spiral out of control. The city spread beneath him in layered light and shadow. The mark along his arm pulsed faintly, synchronized now with something else. Not the system. Her. Kael'thira joined him without announcement. She leaned against the railing, mirroring his posture so precisely it would have looked rehearsed to anyone watching. It was, she simply adapted. The outer fringe has gone quiet, she said. No probes, no signals. They learned, Jonah replied. Not that you're stronger. She glanced at him. That were expensive, he finished, her lips curved. Yes. But they stood in silence for a while. It was different now, no longer tense, no longer charged with unspoken threat. This was the silence that followed survival, the kind earned, not imposed. You should return to Earth, Kael'thira said suddenly. Jonah blinked. That's new. You are no longer bound, she continued. The council voted this morning. Your exile is formally rescinded. Jonah felt the mark stir, not pain, recognition. They think sending me away fixes things, he said. They think distance restores control, Kael'thira replied. They are wrong. Jonah turned to face her fully. Is this what you want? Kael'thira did not answer immediately. She looked out over the city, over people who would never know how close they had come to becoming statistics instead of citizens. When I bound myself to consequence, she said slowly, I believed it would weaken me. Jonah waited. It did not, she continued. It clarified. She met his gaze. But clarity comes with a cost. I can no longer pretend that ruling alone is sufficient. Jonah's throat tightened. So, what are you saying? Kael'thira straightened. Not into command posture, into something personal. I am asking you to stay, she said. Not as envoy, not as conscience. She gestured subtly between them to the invisible thread they both now felt. As partner. The words settled, heavy, deliberate, chosen. Jonah let out a slow breath. You realize staying means I'll keep challenging you, he said. Publicly, privately, relentlessly. Yes, and that I'll feel every mistake we make. Yes, and that one day this might break me. Kael'thira stepped closer. Then I will break with you, she said. Jonah searched her face, looking for dominance, for strategy, for hidden leverage. Found none. Only resolve. He nodded once. All right, he said, but we do this my way too. Her brow lifted. Explain. No secrecy between us, Jonah said. No decisions you don't explain. And when the mark tells me something's wrong, you listen. Kael'thira considered this. Then she extended her hand. Not in ritual, not in command, in choice. Agreed, she said. Jonah took it. The moment their skin touched, the mark flared, brief, bright, then settled into a steady rhythm. Not alarm, alignment. Somewhere deep within the Ashen Reach, systems registered the change, not as a command override, but as a new constant. Two authorities, one consequence. The council convened later that cycle. Kael'thira stood at the center. Jonah at her side, not elevated, not subordinate, present. This system will no longer rule by distance alone, Kael'thira announced. We will feel what we decide. Murmurs rippled, but no one objected. They had felt it too. Enough. When it was over, Jonah and Kael'thira walked back through the corridors together, unguarded. You know, Jonah said, Earth is going to ask why I didn't come back. Kael'thira glanced at him. What will you tell them? He smiled faintly. That I found a system worth staying broken for, he said, and a ruler brave enough to feel it. She stopped walking, turned to him. You are dangerous, she said again. Jonah shrugged. So are you. This time when she kissed him, it wasn't observed by councils or recorded by systems. It wasn't proof or provocation. It was quiet, intentional. When they parted, Kael'thira rested her forehead briefly against his. The Ashen Reach will change, she said, slowly, painfully. Jonah nodded. That's how real systems evolve. Above them the city lights adjusted, not brighter, not dimmer, balanced. And for the first time in its long, ruthless history, power in the Ashen Reach was no longer distant. It was shared, and it could feel.